Alrighty, folks. Today, what we're doing is we are unloading the truck. So we've got our compost, and we've backed it into this tiny little area here, and we're gonna unload it. Now we do have a special tool to help us unload this thing, and I forget what it's called, but it's this roller thing that you can see up here, connected right here. So it helps us quite a bit with getting all of this out of the truck. But we're gonna have to shovel some of this out first because it's usually too heavy. So it's not rated for, I don't think, all of the weight that we have here. I think it's rated for like 2,000 pounds, but sometimes we get way more compost than that. So we'll have to give it a little bit of a leg up by removing some of this before we get to spinning or pulling this stuff out. I've tried to do this before and it starts bending quite a bit before it does, so I don't really want to do that. I usually pull out maybe 25% of this little middle part here, and then we'll start using the actual crank to take some of this stuff out. So, stuff is still warm for sure. I can feel it. It smells great though. If you've never smelled fresh compost, nice, earthy, really like kind of a sweet smell. It smells good. Now, if you've had compost and it stinks, that compost is not good. That's what we call bad compost. But hey, use what you have access to. Alrighty. I think we're good there. Now we do have to set up these straps that holds down the tailgate. So we'll get that in place first. That connects one. Now we'll connect the other side. Now I have a steel bumper, so not a big deal to connect this. I think if you had a plastic bumper, this might not work so well. So we're gonna connect this last one. There we go. Now we're gonna go get our arm, our crank lever, and hopefully be able to crank this. Alright, now this is our handle. This is our crank. We'll shove this in here, and hopefully today we don't have enough clearance, but that's okay. We'll make it work. Let's see if we can get some of this tomorrow. I think we got some movement. This is heavy stuff. So sometimes it's probably not ideal, but I will only put it in there about halfway. And that gives me a little bit more space so that I can maneuver it because of this brick wall. Wow. It's heavy today. It's very heavy today. I don't know. I might pull out some more. Might be a good idea to pull some more out. We'll see. Can I pull this? Ugh, no. I tried. Could I move the truck? Yes. But maneuvering the truck in this small area is quite difficult. There we go. That's one crank. She's heavy today, for sure. All right. Maybe if I can hold it, we can get halfway. There we go. All right. All right, we're getting there. Boy. Once we get some of this first stuff to fall, it'll make everything else a lot easier. Basically, we'll build some momentum, which will take it. Just make sure. There's supposed to be like plastic liner that goes on the bottom because I've got spray and bed liner to help it slide more. But sometimes that plastic liner gets caught in the spool and then it's a pain to get out. So I'm trying to pay attention to that so it doesn't get caught up. We're getting close. Extremely close. Oh yeah. This is rolling a lot easier now. There we go. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. And that's all she wrote. It's not perfect, but it will get the job done. It's a lot better than doing it by hand. I could tell you that. Now, still got some stuff in the truck. And we'll pull that out with the manure fork or compost fork and a broom. So let's go get that. Now, if you're wondering how often I do this, it's a once a week endeavor. Once a week, we get a load, we drop it off, and then we do this. All right. Hopefully OSHA's not watching, because this is probably not approved. I'm sure everybody has their own way of cleaning their truck. They get a load of compost, dirt, sand, or whatever. All right. At least I have a spot to step up to now. All right. I gotta move this carefully from the edge because I don't really want it to fall into that bin. That's our sifted stuff that we sifted the other day. Don't want to mix it. Some does fall in there, but I will just scoop that stuff out. And if I have to re-sift it, we'll re-sift it. Do my best not to get it in there, but hey, sometimes it does. I've also noticed that if you leave any material that's got moisture in it in the back of your truck for more than a day, it becomes exponentially more difficult to get it out. So, my recommendation would be if you do something like this, where you get a load that's wet in the back of your truck, get it out ASAP. Don't let it sit there. All right. Doesn't look like we did a good job today. Looks like we got quite a bit of stuff still in the back of the truck. So, oh, one tool I will say that is extremely useful is this. It's called a compost fork or a manure fork. It's fantastic. It's way easier than a shovel. It lets you dig in deep, and it holds way more material than a shovel. And people would think it would fall through, but it doesn't. Love it. Didn't even know these things were a tool until I started composting for a horse stable. And then I was like, what is that? And, you know, I've seen horse stables where they have the plastic one, but I've never seen the metal one. And it just worked so well when I was creating compost over there. I told myself I had to buy one. So I bought one, and then I bought another one. Now at some point, I'm sure I'll have to buy a new handle for it, because these sit outside all day long. So oh yeah, moving compost. I guess since we're here, let's talk a little bit about compost. What is it? Compost is organic material that has been broken down. at the basics level, or the basic level, that's what it is. It has gone through some kind of decomposition process. Now there's different types of composting processes or processes. There's different types. You've got static composting, which is the old school, like my grandmother and my grandfather used to do. You just put organic material in a pile and you let it decompose over time, and then you end up with compost, decomposed organic material. Now there's also thermophilic, which is when we get the right ratios of browns and greens, we add some moisture, and then the pile heats up. Now, there's different types of thermophilic composting, but the basic one we'll talk about first is just a carbon to nitrogen ratio, a pile, some water, and the temperatures increase. And ideally, we'd want the temperatures to get above 131 degrees because that is the magical number from the USDA where pathogen reduction and disease reduction occurs. So it's kind of like cooking your meat. Everybody knows that when you cook meat or chicken or beef or pork, the internal temperature is supposed to hit a certain temperature so that it's safe for us to eat. Make sure that it's not going to get anybody sick. Well, in composting, thermophilic composting is the same way. And that temperature for thermophilic compost is 131. Not only does it get rid of the disease pathogens, it also reduces the amount of weeds or weed seeds or any type of seeds really that are in that compost, because seeds that hit those temperatures can't make it. They'll die. And they won't be viable anymore. So that's why in the thermophilic pile, we strive for those temperatures. Now, if you're on a commercial scale, you're required to hit those, and per the USDA, I believe it's 131 for a minimum of 5 turns. And then you have a product that's safe to be able to sell or use or be used for the public. So now that was just a regular thermophilic pile. There's other styles of thermophilic composting, like a static, an aerated static pile, also called ASP, Alpha Sierra Papa. An aerated static pile is exactly what it is. It's aerated, unlike a traditional thermophilic pile. The air is passively moves through that pile, right? Or it's physically moved when we turn the pile, or a machine turns the pile. We're incorporating oxygen back into that pile. In a static or aerated static pile, there are, or air is being forced through that pile, usually via pipes that are underneath the compost pile. And there's usually a huge blower or fan that is attached to those pipes. And that is how a aerated static pile can make compost. Those piles do not require to be turned because there's air being forced through the pile. And why? Well, what's the reasoning behind that? Well, remember in the static pile we talked about the USDA requires a minimum of 5 turns and temperatures of 131 degrees. And that is because the center of that pile will hit those temperatures, but the outside edges of that pile will not. So by turning, we are taking the outside of the pile, adding it back to the center of the pile so that it can also hit those temperatures, so that it will be safe for us to use. In the static aerated pile, it's usually in a container of some sort or contained in an area of some sort. The pipes are underneath it, they force the air through, so that entire pile can hit the required temperatures without the need for it to be turned. Pretty fancy. You need, and in addition to that, it doesn't require, since it doesn't require turning, it doesn't require the same requirement, or it doesn't have the same requirements as a regular thermophilic pile. Like, since we have to turn a thermophilic pile and this pile doesn't have to be turned, it only requires a certain period of time to be cooked. And I can't remember what those time frames are. I want to say it was like 24 hours or 48 hours or something like that at those high temperatures. And then that product is safe to use per the USDA. Again, I don't remember the numbers for aerated static piles, but I'm sure if you go to the USDA website, or I might just put it on the screen down below so that you can see it. But the requirements are different. And that's how you can make a aerated static pile. Less manual labor, but you need equipment, as in pipes and blowers, and I guess that's it, and some space. And that's the two, I think that's the only two forms of thermophilic composting that I'm aware of. There are other ones, or there's different, I guess, containers where that you could purchase to do all of this, right? So usually thermophilic compost, they advertise can be done in a tumbler. Now, I know there's mixed reviews or mixed feelings on tumblers, so I won't belabor this topic, but I've had not the best results with the smaller tumblers. I have heard that the larger tumblers, we're talking about gigantic ones that take, 100, 200 gallons, something like that. Not gallons, I think liters. But the bigger ones that are like the size of a baby cow will compost thermophilically. They will hit temperatures, and you can make sure that it's safe and all that other stuff. Now, those smaller tumblers, I've had no success. I've tried different recipes. I just don't think there's enough thermal mass there to get everything up to temperature. In addition to that, they're usually plastic all the way around, right? And I think that plastic inhibits some of the airflow that's required for composting. So I think that's why a lot of people that I run into that are struggling with a tumbler is because, first, ingredients, they're probably adding too much nitrogen, and then it goes anaerobic because there's not enough airflow to get rid of the excess moisture and keep those microbes, the aerobic microbes, fed. So they're difficult. But if anybody knows how to get one of those going and hit temperatures of 131 with a minimum of 5 turns or 3 turns, depending on which school of thought you go with, then let me know. Post your recipe down below, because I'd love to know. Come on now. These are I don't know if y'all can see that, but these are the plastic pieces that are at the bottom that help everything slide out. Definitely works better with them than without. I've done it once without it, and I don't recommend. Definitely get some plastic and put it down there. Again, this is a truck unloader. I think a truck bed unloader. You can probably buy it anywhere. I think this is the one that's rated for like 2,000 pounds, or 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. It still struggles with a truckload of compost, but it's better than shoveling it all out by hand. I'll tell you that. I did that for too long, and I think it was only like a few $100. Definitely worth it. Highly recommend if you're going to be doing this type of stuff or unloading your truck multiple times with heavy things. All right, composting. Yeah, for composting, that's about it. I think when we're talking about traditional compost piles, you got the static, which is just on the ground, old school. We've got the thermophilic, which is the right ingredients with some moisture, hits the right temperatures for the right amount of turns, and then turns into a good product. Oh, the static pile, you gotta let that sit for a while. We're talking probably what, a year, 18 months or something like that, depending on your ingredients and your environment. So don't expect fast compost from a static pile. But static pile, you work less. So that's the trade-off. Time, labor. And then we have a aerated static pile where we're using equipment to heat up, or blow air through that material so it all heats up. Different ways to do it. They all end up with the same result: compost. And usually good compost. All right. Oh, I guess we did talk about tumblers. I got some of this compost stuck in the tailgate. If I don't get it out, it might not close. All right, that should be good. We're gonna pull the truck forward and then get this cleaned up. All right. Sweet. Now we'll get this cleaned up. Well, the tailgate, that is. All right. All right. There's other tools that we can use to be able to compost. The tumbler is the one that we just got done talking about. But another one is using a hardware cloth and making a container. You can also use hardware cloth. You can also use pallets, anything that makes a container to compost, right? The key thing with containers is that you want plenty of airflow. We don't want to constrict anything. So if you ever look at the Johnson Sioux composting method, right, it's all hardware cloth. It's very breathable, and they even add pipes through the middle to add more airflow. If that doesn't tell you that airflow is important for a compost, I don't know what is. Additionally, the method of aerated static compost. Aeration is the key there to keep that compost decomposing. So, when you're using a tumbler, going back to the tumbler, it's a solid sidewalls, right? Like this, you're going to suffocate that pile. And it's not big enough to hold the heat in when it does finally if it were to finally be able to get up to temperatures. But hardwood cloth is a great tool to use if you're going to be making compost. You can make like the cylinder ones, like the Johnson Sue, or the one that Dr. Laningham talks about or uses or creates. Those are the ones that I used earlier when I was talking about the horse stable when I created compost there. I used hardware cloth and it was very, very effective. It definitely worked. I had zero issues with the piles getting up to temperature or maintaining an aerobic condition, even with the horse manure and the horse bedding, which was pine shavings. Pine shavings are pretty fine, and horse manure is, well, it can be pretty fine. It's not dairy manure or anything, but trying to keep that stuff from going anaerobic can be difficult sometimes. Of course, I did add wood chips into the pile. Need a little bit of structure there, right? But yeah, hardware cloth is definitely a good way to go if you're going to make your own compost. You start off with a pallet at the bottom. Once you have the pallet down, then you'll just use the hardware cloth, make a 36-inch or 36-inch diameter ring, and then uh, once you have that ring, you'll set it up. You can use bungee cords to hold the ring together, or you can use um, what is it called? Metal wire to fasten it together, and that's it. Then you can start building your compost. Pretty simple. But every composting method, for the most part, works. It's just different techniques, different sizes, right? And different time periods that are required. Now, one thing we did not talk about, and I'm a worm farm, is vermicomposting, which is composting with worms. There's also different ways to do that. All right. There's You can compost on the ground or even in the ground. Some people will dig out the ground. They will line both sides with bricks, fill in the bottom with concrete, put the organic material there, and put the worms in. That's one way to do it. But you can use anything. You don't have to use bricks and concrete. You could use whatever to build that system. I think we're good there. I think that closed. So that would be above ground or in ground system, and you just continue to feed that system. Another bin would be, or another type of vermicomposting would be a continuous flow through bin, or also called a CFT. These are a little different. These are usually containers or bins that are large. Usually they start at about 4 feet wide by 8 feet long, and they have a grate at the bottom, and that grate is open, and it's so that the worm castings can fall through, because you harvest the worm castings from the bottom. So what basically happens is, if you think about a 4 by 8 foot bin, you just fill it up with organic material, put worms in there, and since most composting worms are epigeic worms, they'll stay at the surface, and then you can harvest the worm castings from the bottom. Now, there are some techniques you got to have, or things you got to do to keep the material from falling, right? Falling through, because it is a grate at the bottom. And that grate has to be quite large because you don't want anything to get stuck. So, I just thought about it. You guys are behind that giant mound. You probably can't see me or what I'm doing. Hopefully you can. But, all right. CFTs. Use some special techniques. So we use usually like paper or cardboard, or at the bottom of a CFT or craft paper, to hold in all the material. And as that material decomposes, the craft cardboard paper stuff at the bottom usually will get wet. And then when you're ready to harvest, it's easy to break through. And that's a CFT system. Those can be small, right? Like I've created my own, which are 2 feet by 6 feet, or you can buy a bigger system that's 4x8s, and some of those 4x8 systems you can actually link together. And I believe it used to be called Michigan Soil Works, but I think they're called Worm Gear. If you go to Worm Gear, he's got those bins available, and there's a couple other manufacturers out there that also have those types of CFTs. Now, another type of vermicomposting is the stacking bins. This is the ones that I took a video of, and I showed you guys, where you just have multiple bins and they stack on top of each other. They have holes. Each tray has holes on the bottom, and you fill the trays up with organic material, and then the worms are supposed to travel down or up, whatever you want to call it, but those worms will go wherever they really want to. It's a great idea to think that the worms are going to travel, but believe it or not, the worms are really going to go wherever the moisture is at and wherever the food's at. And usually moisture falls down by gravity, so the worms are going to end up in the bottom, and then they're going to be wherever the food's at. So that system works. Another system that's not too often used but can be in vermicomposting is a regular bin, whether you use like a bus bin or a mortar tray. And these bins can actually be quite large, to where it can be, you can use a forklift, right, to move these bins. Could be a 4x8, but what you do is you just fill all that organic material in there, and then you put the worms in there, and then you would harvest that entire container, whether it's a small size bin or a massive bin, all at once. You would have to separate the worms from the worm castings. That is the difference in the worm composting world. Is some containers will keep the worms separate from the worm castings, where others you will have to separate the worms from the worm castings. I think the only system that will keep it separate is if you do a wedge system on the ground, or a migratory system, and the CFT, or the continuous flow through bins. Those systems will actually keep the majority of the worms moving, so that you can harvest the worm castings. All the other ones, you're going to have to separate the worms from the castings. And then if you want to separate cocoons, you can do that too. So I think I've kind of covered composting and vermicomposting in a nutshell. And I'm done here. This pile is now, it's quite massive. Um, but we're done here with this, and for today. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to move the truck out, close the gate, and we'll call it a day. I think we've got some other stuff to do, like water the worms and get these compost piles water as well, but that's going to be it for today. So thank you guys for, I almost died. Thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you on the next video.